There was a little carved wren in the pocket of my dress that night, no bigger than a walnut, worn smooth on the back where my thumb had rubbed it for the better part of 30 years, and I had my hand wrapped around it under the table like it was the only solid thing left in the room. Picture it with me. A private banquet hall. 22 people in their good clothes. Candlelight on the water glasses. A long table dressed for a celebration, because 10 weeks earlier my father had come within a hair of dying, and here he sat at the head of it, breathing, pink in the face, alive. Alive because of the kidney I gave him. My mother rose out of her chair. She tapped her glass with the edge of a spoon, that bright little ring that tells a room to hush, and she smiled wider than I'd seen her smile in years, and she lifted her wine, and she said the words I will hear in my sleep for the rest of my life. To Whitney. My remarkable daughter. The one who saved your father's life. And 22 glasses went up into the light. Not one of them tipped toward me. Not one of those 22 people so much as glanced down the table to where I was sitting, with a fresh scar still healing pink above my collar, a stack of hospital bills at home I couldn't pay, and a checking account that had slipped into the red keeping myself alive while I kept him alive. My sister Whitney stood and pressed a tissue to her eye and thanked everyone for the fundraiser. And I set my napkin on the table and pushed back my chair to leave, because some rooms a person just cannot stay inside of one more second, and that is the exact instant my father's hand shot out from the head of the table and closed around my wrist. Frail as he was, that grip was iron. He looked up at me with his eyes brimming, full of shame and something underneath it I couldn't name yet, and without one word he slid a folded napkin across the tablecloth toward me and whispered, "Lo, meant for me and nobody else. Read it. Please." Not yet. What was written on the inside of that napkin, in his own shaking hand, turned that whole table over. Not that night. But soon. It rearranged who walked away with everything and who walked away with nothing. It ended a marriage of 41 years. It split a second marriage clean down the middle across town. And it did all of it quietly, on paper, in a place where no amount of screaming could reach. So before I take you all the way back and show you how a lifelong coward finally found his backbone 1 decade too late, and right on time, do me one small kindness. Stay with me all the way to the end of this one. Because the moment the 2 people who spent my whole life erasing me finally understood exactly what they had done. I promise you, it lands harder than any shouting match ever could. Pull up a chair. Let me take it from the top. My name is Della Marsh. I'm 31 years old. 10 weeks before that dinner, I gave my father my left kidney and I saved his life. And at the party thrown to celebrate that his life was saved, my own mother stood up in front of the whole family and handed the credit to my sister, a woman who never gave him so much as a drop of blood, who threw a gala for herself and dressed it up as charity. For 31 years, I had been the one nobody sees. The daughter you leave off the list. The grown woman still parked at the kids' table. The birthday that got pushed to next weekend, and then quietly disappeared. I'd made a kind of peace with all of it, the way you make peace with a bad hip. You just stop reaching for the high shelf and you get on with your day. But there's no making peace with being toasted out of your own sacrifice. There's no shelf high enough to set that on. Before I walk you through how it all came apart for them, legally, quietly, and then all at once in a boardroom in front of people who counted, do me a favor. Tap that subscribe button, ring the bell, and down in the comments, tell me where in the world you're watching from and what the time is where you are right now. I read every comment that comes through. I love knowing who's sitting up with me tonight. If you have ever been the one in your family who had to earn a spot that should have been handed to you for free, you are going to want to hear all of this. Because what my father did in a hospital bed, 1 floor up from where I lay all alone, is the part not a soul in that family saw coming. And I still can't tell it without my hands going cold. Let me take you back. Every family runs a kind of arithmetic. From the outside you'd never spot it. And from the outside, the Marsh family of Louisville looked like a picture somebody paid real money to have painted. My father, Dale Marsh, built Marsh Commercial Refrigeration out of a single rented truck in 1996 into the outfit that put the walk-in coolers in half the restaurants and groceries in the state. My mother, Gail, ran the part of us that other people got to see, the church luncheons, the Christmas cards, the seating charts, the shine on the whole thing. We waved at the neighbors. We bowed our heads before supper and looked like we meant every word. But inside that house there was a ledger, and every child born into it had a column. And the two columns never came out even. My sister, Whitney, is 5 years older than me. From the day she came home from the hospital she was the one the money flowed toward. Dance lessons, then private school, then a car in the driveway with a ribbon on the hood the morning she turned 16. When Whitney wanted a thing, my mother called it an investment in her future. When I wanted a thing, my mother called it money we didn't have. "You're my easy one, Della," she used to tell me, like she was pinning a medal on my chest. You never did need much. It took me a good long while to learn what easy meant under that roof. Easy meant skippable. Easy meant the one who carries the casserole dish while the party goes on in the next room without her. Easy meant the part of a machine you only notice on the day it quits, so I made sure I never quit, because I'd learned young that quitting only got you noticed for the wrong reasons. There was one person who saw me long before anything ever quit. But I'll get to him. He is the reason I can sit here tonight with a roof over my head that nobody on this earth can take. First, you have to understand the little carved wren. When I was 5, my father sat me on the back steps on a summer evening and he whittled me a bird out of a scrap of basswood, a plain little brown wren, no bigger than a walnut, with 2 chip-carved eyes and a tail that tipped up the way a wren's does. He set it in my palm and he pointed his knife toward the hedge, where the racket was coming from. "You hear that, fella?" he said. "That's a wren. Littlest bird in the whole yard, and he'll outsing every cardinal and every jay on the block. Nobody ever looks at him. He knows it, too. And you know what he does about it? He closed my fingers around the little bird. He sings anyway." I was 5. I thought it was a pretty thing to say about a bird. I understand now he was telling me who I was to him, back then, before he lost the nerve to say it in front of anybody who mattered. Because here's the piece it took me 31 years and a lawyer with a box of tissues to understand. My father had a younger sister. Nadine. She died in a house fire the winter I was born, 19 years old, and I came up looking so much like her it stopped him in the doorway sometimes. Same wide-set eyes, same crooked front tooth, the same way of humming under my breath when I was thinking. He couldn't always look straight at me. His throat would just close. And my mother could not abide it. She could not abide that he'd carried a grief that big before he ever met her. She could not abide a little girl who dragged that grief back into the room every single day just by existing. So she did the slow, patient work of moving me out to the edge of that family, one skipped birthday, one earlier bedtime, one "we'll get to you next" at a time. And my father, a man who could stare down a bank in a bad year and a hurricane season on the coast, chose peace over his own child. Over and over. For decades. I kept that little wren on a shelf in every place I ever lived. The dorm, the studio with the window that never shut all the way, the walk up over the laundromat. Wherever I landed, that bird got the spot where I could see it from the bed. If you were ever the one who reminded your family of something they'd rather not look at, if you got made small so somebody else could feel big, type "skipped" in the comments. I need to know I wasn't the only kid who ever sat at that table feeling like a ghost. By 31, I'd built myself a small, safe life a good distance from all of them. I run the meal routes at a nonprofit called Golden Table. We cook and deliver hot suppers to homebound folks, mostly old, mostly alone, the kind of people the world quit noticing a long time ago. I make $38,000 a year and I have never once regretted it. I lived in a one-room walk-up 15 minutes from my parents' house, and my mother had me over maybe 4 times a year. My sister, meanwhile, was vice president of operations at Marsh Commercial Refrigeration, pulling down north of $180,000, with a husband, 2 kids, a house out in the good part of the county, and every ounce of my mother's attention. I'd stopped going to family things back in 2023. The Christmases where I sat with the children at 29. The company parties I wasn't really part of. I decided one winter that being invisible from a distance hurt a little less than being invisible 3 feet away. But somebody still had my number. On a Saturday night in July, my father collapsed at the company's silver anniversary banquet. 200 people, black tie, speeches about legacy and family and the road ahead. I wasn't invited. I found out it had even happened from a post my sister put up the next morning about our family's strength in hard times. But that night, at 9:45, my cousin Kayla texted me, "Your dad collapsed at the banquet. Ambulance took him to St. Aloysius. Thought you'd want to know." I was on my couch eating cold rice out of the takeout box, half watching some show about people flipping rundown houses. I put the box down. I drove across town in the dark with my heart hammering the whole way. I reached the emergency room a little after 10:30. My mother and my sister were already there, heads bent together, murmuring. When my mother looked up and saw me, her face didn't loosen with relief. It pinched with something a lot closer to irritation. "How is he?" I asked. "They're running tests," she said, flat as a griddle. "It's his kidneys." 40 minutes later a doctor came out and talked straight to my mother, as though I weren't standing an arm's length away. Stage 4 kidney failure. He'd need a transplant inside of 2 months or he'd spend whatever was left of his life hooked to a dialysis machine. They'd want to test the family. A living donor was the best hope going, the other kind of list ran years deep. "We'll do whatever it takes," my mother said. I noticed she said we. I was standing right there, and I still didn't fit inside the word. When they finally let us in to see him, my mother and sister went first. When they came out, my mother told me I could go in, if I wanted, but don't tire him out. I pushed the door open. He looked gray under those lights, wired up to machines, a little tube of oxygen under his nose. And when his eyes found me, they filled right up. "You came," he whispered. "Your mother said you'd likely be too busy. That you don't do family anymore." And there, in that beeping little room, I understood. She'd been telling him for years that I was the one who'd walked away. She'd rewritten me right to my own father's face. "I'm here, Dad," I said, and I took his hand. "I'm not going anywhere." He squeezed my fingers, weak as a child's. "They said I need a kidney." I can't ask you kids to." "I'll get tested," I said. "Tomorrow." Out in the corridor I passed my mother, low-voiced, saying to my sister, "She'll test and then she'll back out. You know how she is." I kept walking. And I'll tell you, my hands weren't trembling from fear anymore. They were trembling from something with a much sharper edge. I called the transplant office the next morning before I'd even had my coffee. I told them who I was, and that I wanted to be tested as a living donor for Dale Marsh. They could see me at 2 that afternoon. I told them I'd be there. I didn't tell my mother. I didn't tell my sister. Some things you keep to yourself until they're solid enough to stand on. A week later my phone went off while I was loading meal coolers into the delivery van. Blood type O positive. Tissue compatibility 98%. Kidney function, in the coordinator's word, excellent. I was, she said, an ideal donor. I sat down on the back bumper of that van in the parking lot and I cried, relief and dread wound together so tight I couldn't have told you where one ended and the other began. Then I called my father straight off. "Dad. I got tested. I'm a match. I want to do this." His voice broke right down the middle. "Della. You don't have to." "I know," I said. "I want to." There was a long quiet on the line. Then, soft, "Your mother's going to have plenty to say about this." "Let her," I said. 2 days later my mother called a family meeting at the house, my father home on strict rest, my sister, me. My mother opened it like she was chairing a board. "We need to go over Dale's options." I told them plainly that I was a match and I was willing. Silence. Then she fixed her eyes on me. "You got tested without telling any of us." I wanted to be sure first. My sister jumped in fast. "I was going to get tested myself this week." A lie, and we both knew it. She'd scheduled nothing. Then my mother turned to my father and asked him, right in front of me, whether he truly wanted Della to be the one. Like I was a contractor with a bad review. She floated the idea of finding another living donor, a friend, somebody from the company, anyone who isn't your daughter. I looked at her. Why? I'm a perfect match. I'm willing. What is the problem? And she looked me dead in the eyes and said the sentence I will carry to my grave. The problem is you have never once in your life finished a single hard thing you started. I drove home in silence. But that night my father called me. Della. If you're sure, then let's do it. I trust you. It was the first time in more years than I could count that anyone in that family had said those 3 words to me and meant them. If your own people ever added up your worth and came back with a number that was a flat-out lie, if somebody who was supposed to love you called you a quitter to your face, type my choice in the comments. Because I want every person who ever bet against you to see exactly how many of us are down here. 3 days after that, my sister called me. Whitney calling me was rare enough that I looked twice to be sure it was her name on the screen. I've been thinking, she said. Since you're doing the donation, I want to help. I'm going to put together a fundraiser. Kidney disease awareness. We can raise money for research, help with some of Dad's bills. Turn this whole scary thing into something good. Something in my stomach pulled tight, but I told her it sounded kind. A gala, she went on, warming to it. Company sponsors. I think I can get the local news out for it. Make it a real event. Will it say that I'm the donor? I asked. Of course, she said. It's about the whole family coming together. But I could already hear it, the way she was shaping the story with her voice, and the shape had her standing dead center, and it didn't have me anywhere in the frame. A week later I searched her name online and there it was, the event listing. The Whitney Marsh Doyle Kidney Health Initiative, standing with the Marsh family. I read the whole write-up twice. My name wasn't in it. Not one time. Here's what I couldn't see yet, and only pieced together later. My father was 64. He'd been talking about retiring at 65 for 2 years running, and the question of who would take the company after him had been hanging over every holiday like a low, gray ceiling. This fundraiser was never about my father's medical bills. It was my sister's audition for his chair. I couldn't see it then. I was too busy getting ready to give away a piece of my own body to keep our father on this side of the ground. Before they'll let you give up an organ, they want to be dead certain you're doing it clear-eyed and for the right reasons. I sat with a hospital social worker named Linda Pruitt for my final evaluation. Kind woman, steady hands, the sort who's heard everything and doesn't flinch. She asked about my support system, my grasp of the risks, whether I felt any pressure. Then she asked, do you feel seen by your family? Appreciated, for what you're about to do? And I sat there too long without an answer. I said no to the pressure question and I couldn't get a single word out for the other one. Linda made a small note and moved us gently along. I found out a good while later what she wrote in my file that afternoon: donor psychologically sound and fully informed. Family dynamics of concern, mother's language toward patient minimizing and dismissive. Flag for post-operative follow-up. And I found out something else later too. Something that knocked the wind clean out of me when I finally read it in plain print. But that's a card I'm keeping face down for now. When I turn it over, you'll understand why my hands still go cold at the sight of it. The night before surgery I couldn't sleep. I lay there scrolling my sister's page, pictures of her at planning meetings, captions about doing everything I can for Dad. Around 11, my phone lit up. My father. Della. You awake? Yeah, Dad. You can still back out. Nobody would think less of you. I'm not backing out. He was quiet a second. When you wake up tomorrow, it's going to hurt. And I'm going to be alive because of you. I will carry that as long as I live. I took a breath, and I asked him for the one thing I have ever asked that man for. Promise me something. Don't let them erase this. Don't let Mom turn it into something it isn't. There was a long pause on the line, long enough that I thought the call had dropped. Then, I won't, he said. I promise you that. I had no earthly idea, lying there in the dark with that little wooden bird in my fist, that he was already awake across town, working out, step by step, exactly how he meant to keep it. Surgery morning. I got to the hospital in the dark, 5:30. My mother and my sister were already parked in the pre-op waiting area. I caught my sister on her phone. Yes, the surgery's today, I'll post updates. No, we're keeping it quiet for now, but I'll have a statement ready after the gala. She was drafting the press release before they'd even put me under. The two of them stopped by my curtained bay for maybe half a minute. My mother said, "Good luck." My sister said, "You're so brave." Then they left, to go sit with my father. The surgeon, Dr. Sofia Reyes, walked me through it one final time. 4 or 5 hours. I'd wake up hurting. The anesthesiologist told me to count backward from 10. I made it to 7. I woke at 2:17 in the afternoon to a fire in my left side unlike anything I'd ever felt. I tried to call out and my throat was too raw from the breathing tube to make a sound. Machines beeped somewhere. And it came to me slowly, through the fog, I was completely alone in that recovery bay. For 6 hours, nurses checked my numbers and moved on. Around 4, one mentioned in passing that my father had sailed through, that his new kidney had started working right there on the table. His family was with him, she said. I asked whether somebody could come sit with me. She said they were focused on my dad just now, but she'd pass it along. Nobody came. At 8 in the evening a different nurse came in, Beth, older, gentle, and she looked at me a long moment and asked whether there was anyone she could call, because I shouldn't be by myself after major surgery. "Oh, my family's here," I said. "They're just down with my dad." Her whole face changed. "Sweetheart. Your mom and your sister have been in your father's room since 3 o'clock. They know you're awake. You want me to go get them?" "No," I said. "He needs them more than I do." She looked at me for a while. "That's not how any of this is supposed to work, hon." My mother finally turned up at the foot of my bed at 9:30. She told me they were moving me to a room, that my father was stable, that the kidney was a perfect match. Then she said, "Get some rest. We'll check on you tomorrow." And she was gone. Not one person had said thank you. But at 10 minutes to 3 in the morning, my door eased open. A night nurse was pushing my father in a wheelchair, oxygen tank strapped to the back, for pole rolling alongside. He was pale as a bedsheet. He wasn't supposed to be out of his own room at all. "I told them I had to see you," he whispered. The nurse gave him 5 minutes. He rolled up close and took my hand and he was crying, this man I had never once in my life seen cry. "I see you, Della," he said. "I have always seen you. And I am going to set this right, if it's the last thing I do on this earth." "Dad, it's all right." "No. It has never once been all right. The way your mother, the way I let her, I am going to fix it." As the nurse wheeled him back toward the door, he said over his shoulder, "In the morning, some people are coming to see me. A lawyer. A social worker. I'm taking care of something." I was too doped up to make sense of a word of it. I dropped back to sleep. If you have ever lain somewhere hurting, waiting on people who never once walked through the door, and then had a single soul show up and tell you they saw you, type "nobody came" in the comments. Because that one visit, at 3 in the morning, is the reason I made it through everything that came after. Here is what I did not know was happening while I lay in that hospital bed with a piece of myself gone. At 11:30 the next morning, my father, weak, but wide awake and clear as a bell, signed a durable power of attorney for his health care. He moved his medical proxy off my mother and onto me. Witnessed by Dr. Reyes and by Linda Pruitt, the social worker. Stamped by the hospital notary. Timed. Dated. Airtight. 2 days after that, he signed a beneficiary change on his life insurance, a policy he'd carried 18 years, $2.6 million, with my mother named as the sole beneficiary the whole time. He made me the sole beneficiary instead. A man doesn't need his wife's permission to do that. She had no idea. And a few days after that, he signed a restricted stock transfer for Marsh Commercial Refrigeration. He owned 68% of the company he'd built with his own two hands. He handed 51% of the voting shares to me, and kept 17 for himself, non-voting. 51%. Controlling interest. Filed with the Kentucky Secretary of State before the month was out, a matter of public record, but one a chairman gets to decide exactly when the board gets formally told about. I knew none of it. I was home in my one room, alone, relearning how to stand up from a chair without gasping. Let me tell you what recovering from giving somebody your kidney really costs, because that fundraiser sure didn't. The first 2 weeks I could barely lift a coffee mug. I couldn't drive. I couldn't reach the plates on the top shelf or carry my own laundry down the stairs, and I slept 16 hours out of 24. Nobody offered to help. My mother called one time to ask how I was managing, told me my father's kidney function was at 95%, and hung up before I'd finished my answer. On day 10 my sister texted, "How's recovery? Gala planning is going amazing, so excited." By week 2 my boss, Carol, called me, and she sounded sick about it. We didn't carry paid medical leave for anything this long. I was already 2 weeks in with no pay. They could hold my job through 8 weeks, and past that, she couldn't promise. I ran a fever in week 4, 101 and change, and spent a night in the ER, which ran me $1,200 after insurance. So one night I sat down and did my own arithmetic, the honest kind, the kind that doesn't cook the books the way my mother's always did. 9 weeks of leave with no pay. $6,300 in wages gone. My deductible, $2,500. Pre-op tests they wouldn't cover, close to $900. That ER visit, $1,200. Prescriptions, another few hundred. Added up and it came to a little over $11,000 out of my own pocket, a pocket that had exactly $3,100 in it before any of this started. I went into overdraft. I signed up for a hardship plan, $200 a month for a year, with no idea on God's green earth where I'd find $200 a month. Meanwhile my sister's fundraiser was everywhere I turned. Local news. Company posts. The gala set for a Saturday at Beargrass Country Club, which, of course, I wasn't invited to. One article mentioned standing with the Marsh family through their medical journey. My name did not turn up in it a single time. Somewhere in week 6, a letter came from my father. Inside was a check for $2,000 and a note in his careful print, "For your medical costs. I know it isn't enough. I'm sorry I can't do more right now without raising questions." I read that phrase, "without raising questions," 4 or 5 times over. I deposited the check. It covered less than a fifth of what I owed. I didn't understand yet what he was guarding, or how much bigger the thing he was building for me really was. I'd stayed clear of my phone through most of the recovery. But in early November a coworker sent me a link with 3 words, "Have you seen?" The gala had come and gone. 150 guests, a silent auction, speeches. My sister's post showed her holding one of those oversized novelty checks, my mother beside her in an evening gown, my father in his wheelchair wearing a thin, tired smile. The caption, "Overwhelmed with gratitude." Together we raised $91,000 for kidney disease research. My father's journey inspired this, and I am so honored to have led it. Family is everything. A little over 2,000 likes. Top comment, "You're an angel, Whitney. What a daughter." 23 photos. I was in exactly one of them, far in the back, blurry, and the only reason I even knew it was me was the gray cardigan I'd been wearing. So I started making phone calls, the way you do when the numbers stop adding up. I called the Kidney Foundation the money was supposed to go to. They confirmed the donation. I asked who took the tax credit for it. Corporate matching, the woman said, gets credited to the sponsoring company. Marsh Commercial Refrigeration had matched the gala total and taken a $45,000 write-off. My father's company. And a press release, dated the week after, called it corporate social responsibility, spearheaded by VP Whitney Marsh Doyle, in keeping with company values. Then I found an industry piece titled Leaders to Watch in Commercial Supply. It quoted my sister directly, something about how, in times of family crisis, true leaders rise, and how she'd turned a personal hardship into an opportunity for community impact. I read that one line more times than I want to admit. Personal hardship. That's what they were calling the piece of me keeping our father breathing. It clicked all the way home right then. This had never been a fundraiser. It was a resume. My sister wasn't raising money. She was raising herself, straight up onto the chair my father was about to leave empty. In the middle of November, 10 weeks past the surgery, Dr. Reyes cleared me for a normal life. Permanent restrictions, no contact sports, kidney checks every 6 months for the rest of my days, a higher lifetime chance of blood pressure trouble, and the plain fact that I could never, ever donate an organ again. I'd only had the one to give, and I'd given it. That same afternoon, my mother texted, "Family dinner Sunday to celebrate Dale's recovery. 6 p.m., Rowan Hall, the Camden Room. Cocktail attire. Be there. Not please. Not thank you for saving his life. Just be there." I stared at it a long while. Then I typed back, "I'll be there." I bought a plum-colored dress for the occasion. I dropped so much weight in recovery that nothing I owned hung right. The neckline sat just low enough to show the top of the scar, an inch or two of raised pink tissue above the collarbone. I stood in that store and thought about swapping it for something higher cut. Then I thought, no. Let them look at what it cost. And I kept it. The night before, I called my father. "Dad. I need to know. Is Mom going to bring up the donation at this dinner?" Long silence. "Della, I can't control what your mother says. But I can control what comes after it. Please, trust me. Just come tomorrow." The Camden Room. A table set for 24, 2 no-shows. Name cards at every place. I found mine near the very end, seat 18 of 22, wedged between a cousin I'd met exactly once and my cousin Kayla. My father at the head. To his right, my mother, then Whitney, then Whitney's husband, Tyler. I was so far down the table I was practically in the coat closet. "Why are you all the way down here?" Kayla whispered. "Mom did the seating," I said, "and she didn't need it spelled out." During the cocktail hour I stood off to the side with a glass of water, still on pain medication, couldn't touch wine. My sister worked the room with photos of the gala on her phone. And my little niece, Maddie, all of 8, walked up and pointed and asked, "Aunt Della, why do you have that line on your neck?" "I had surgery, sweetheart." "Did it hurt?" "Yes," I said. "Mommy says you should cover up scars at fancy dinners." My sister overheard. For half a second something crossed her face, guilt, maybe, and then it smoothed right back over, and she pulled Maddie off toward the shrimp. At 6:42 my mother tapped her glass. Soup came out. I couldn't touch a spoonful of it. And then my mother stood, and I knew, the way you know a storm's coming by the color of the sky, exactly where this was headed. She talked about how 3 months ago they'd nearly lost him. How it was the most frightening stretch of the family's life. And then, but in that darkness, one person stepped up. One person showed extraordinary strength, and leadership, and love. My heart was slamming against my ribs. That person, my mother said, organized a fundraiser that brought our whole community together. She held this family up when I was falling to pieces. And she raised her glass, and she turned toward my sister, and she said it. To Whitney. My remarkable daughter. The one who saved your father's life. 22 glasses went up. My father's own sister-in-law started to say something. "Gail, wait," I thought, but my mother rolled right over the top of her, and the glasses clinked all the way down the table like a wave rolling into shore, and mine stayed flat on the cloth, because I could not make my hand rise to meet them. My sister stood and dabbed at tears that looked real enough. "Thank you, Mom. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. But Dad's worth it. Family is everything." The cousin beside me leaned in. "Your sister's really something." You must be so proud. I couldn't get a sound out. She might as well have said my real daughter, because that is exactly what I heard. So I stood up. My chair scraped the floor. Heads turned. And I started for the door, and that is when my father's hand shot out and caught my wrist and stopped me cold, and he slid that folded napkin across the cloth, and whispered, "Read it. Please." Not yet. I sat back down. My mother asked, too sweet, whether I was all right. "I'm fine, Mom," I said, and my own voice came out cold and level in a way that surprised even me. Just taking in how generous Whitney is. And I unfolded that napkin in my lap, below the table, where not one soul could see. His handwriting was unsteady, but every word came through clear. "I moved the medical proxy to you the morning after your surgery. Life insurance, $2.6 million, you are the only beneficiary now. The company, 51% of the voting shares, signed over to you, filed with the state. Your mother and sister don't know yet. Everything is with my attorney. His name is Sam Delgado. I was a coward for 31 years. I'm done being one. I see you now. Dad." I read it once. Then again. Then a third time, because my eyes kept sliding off the words like they couldn't hold that much weight at one time. I looked up the length of the table at him. He gave me the smallest nod in the world. I folded that napkin into a tight little square and I tucked it into my clutch, right beside the wooden wren, and I picked my spoon back up, and I ate cold soup while the whole table went on congratulating my sister on the kidney she never gave. At 8:45 the dinner broke up. I thanked my mother for hosting. I hugged my father and told him I'd call him tomorrow. And I walked out to my car and sat under the dome light and read those 7 lines about 40 more times while my hands finally caught up with the rest of me and started to shake. 51% of the voting shares. That is not a gift. That is control. $2.6 million, the security my mother had been banking on for 18 years. Medical proxy, the right to decide, if it ever came down to it, what my father would truly want, instead of what would look best in a Christmas letter. They don't know yet. My phone buzzed. A missed call, a voicemail. A man named Sam Delgado, an estate attorney downtown. "Ms. Marsh, returning your call, your father told me you'd reach out after the family dinner. I can see you Monday at 9. Everything your father put in place is ironclad. Witnessed, notarized, properly filed. I'll walk you through all of it. See you Monday. After the family dinner." He'd planned even that. He'd needed me to sit there and see it with my own 2 eyes, to watch them lift their glasses to the wrong daughter, so that I would never, not for 1 second, doubt that it was real. Sam Delgado was 58, silver at the temples, kind eyes with a sharp mind sitting right behind them. He poured me coffee and pushed a plate of shortbread across the desk and told me to take one, so I did. "Your father speaks awfully highly of you," he said. "He's never once said that to me directly," I said. "He told me that too," Delgado said, with a small smile. "Said he owes you 31 years of words he never found the nerve to say. He's trying to make it up now." He opened the first folder. The medical proxy, signed the morning after my surgery, witnessed by my surgeon and the social worker, notarized. "Your father told me why," Delgado said. He said, and I'm quoting him, "If I have another crisis, I don't trust Gail to pick what's best for me. She'll pick what's best for her image. Della will pick what I'd truly want." Second folder. The life insurance. $2.6 million, my mother the beneficiary for 18 years, changed over to me, effective immediately, no permission required. "Your mother believed she was the beneficiary this whole time," Delgado said. "This is going to be very hard on her." "That's not my concern," he added, before I could get the question out, "and it wasn't your father's either. His concern was that you saved his life. So you get the policy." Third folder. The stock. 51% of the voting shares of Marsh Commercial Refrigeration, transferred to me, filed with the state, official seal, My name in legal print as the majority holder. My mother left with 25%, non-voting. My sister with 7, non-voting. You can seat the board, Delgado said. You can remove officers. Approve budgets. Hire and fire executives, your mother and your sister included. Your father timed the board's formal notice for right before the December quarterly meeting. He wanted them to hear it from you, in the room, and not 1 minute sooner. Then Delgado handed me a sealed envelope. 2 pages, handwritten. My father, in his own words. He told me the truth about Nadine, his little sister, the one I favor, the one my mother could never bear that he'd loved and lost before she ever came along. He wrote that my mother couldn't look at me without seeing that grief, and that instead of protecting me from it, he'd chosen quiet, year after year, and told himself I was tough enough to take it. He wrote that he'd slipped me money over the years, a couple hundred here, a few hundred there, some 30,000 across 8 years, the only thing he could manage without my mother, who kept the books on everything, catching wind of it. And he wrote this, which I have by heart: when they told me you'd given me your kidney, I broke apart. I understood I had spent 31 years choosing my own comfort over my own child. I can't undo it. But I can hand you the power I should have handed you at the start. Fix what I broke, or burn it all to the ground and go free. I'll stand behind whichever one you pick. I just needed you to finally hold the power. I love you. I'm sorry. Dad. I sat in that office and cried, and Sam Delgado slid the tissues across the desk and waited, and never said one word until I was through. What do I do now? I finally asked. That's yours to decide, he said. But I'll tell you what your father told me. He said, wait until they show you exactly who they are. Then move. I wiped my face. They showed me Sunday night. Delgado nodded, slow. Then I'd say you already know. Before I did a thing, I needed one more piece. I called St. Aloysius and asked for my complete medical file from the surgery. $25, 3 business days. I picked up a fat envelope and opened it at my kitchen table, surgical notes, discharge papers, and, stapled in the middle where I nearly missed it, an ethics committee review. An incident report. Dated 3 days after I'd tested compatible. Linda Pruitt, the social worker, had written it. My mother had come to her office, on her own, unasked, and inquired whether there was any way to delay the donation, or find a different donor. She'd said I had emotional problems. That I was doing this for the attention. That I didn't have the maturity for a decision this size. She'd pressed a hospital professional to take a harder look at my state of mind so that they might rule me out. She had tried to stop me from saving my father's life. And she'd done it while smiling at me down the length of a dinner table and handing my sacrifice to my sister. The ethics committee had interviewed me on my own and found me entirely sound. They'd written, in black and white, that the mother's concerns appeared to come out of controlling family dynamics rather than any real medical issue. They went ahead as planned. They'd seen clean through her. That was the card I'd kept face down. That's the one that still makes my hands go cold. Now. The December board meeting. I walked into the 4th floor conference room of Marsh Commercial Refrigeration in a navy blazer, the plastic hospital bracelet from September still cinched around my wrist. I'd kept it, and I wore it on purpose, and the top of my scar showing above my collar, on purpose too. 7 board members. The company attorney, Curtis Nagel. The HR director, Brenda Cho. My mother, already sitting in the chair at the head of the table. I walked over to that chair and stood beside it and said nothing at all. Just stood there. She moved. I sat. Della, she said, you don't usually come to these. I'm the majority shareholder now, I said. I figured I ought to start. I slid the state filing across the table. The room went dead quiet. One of the senior members, Earl Whitaker, looked down the table at my father, Chairman Emeritus, sitting still, and asked, Dale, is this true? My father nodded. I transferred the shares to Della in September. It's legal, and it's final. Then I opened my folder, and I set the record straight. I laid the discharge summary on the table. The donor compatibility report, 98%. The surgical record. I pulled my collar down another inch so the whole scar showed. I told them I gave my father my left kidney in September. That I'd lost 9 weeks of pay and $11,000 and any chance of ever donating again. That at the recovery dinner, my mother had toasted my sister for saving his life, and 22 people had lifted their glasses, and not one of them had said my name. And then I laid down the ethics report, the day my own mother walked into a hospital and tried to get me declared unstable to stop the donation. Brenda Cho's hand was shaking as she took her notes. Earl Whitaker read the medical documents through twice, and his jaw set hard. Curtis Nagel, the attorney, turned to my mother and asked her, careful, whether she had attempted to interfere with a medical procedure. My mother said it had been taken out of context. I said the social worker had put her exact words on the page, and the ethics committee had reached its own conclusion, and it was all sitting in the official hospital record. She had no answer for that. I let the silence stretch until it was heavy enough to feel in your chest. Then I stood. Effective immediately, I said, I'm removing Gail Marsh as Chief Financial Officer, pending review. My mother shot to her feet. You can't. I can, I said. 51%. Article 7, Section 3 of the bylaws. The majority shareholder may remove an officer with or without cause. Curtis? The attorney checked, and confirmed it. I turned to my sister. Whitney. You have until Thursday at 5 to choose. Option 1, a new role, Senior Manager, Special Projects, $92,000 a year. Option 2, we discuss a severance package. She was crying, silent, staring down at the table. I called for a vote. I didn't need one, but I wanted it on the record. Earl Whitaker moved to approve. Brenda Cho seconded. 5 hands went up. My father abstained. The motion carried. I picked up my folder. Meeting adjourned. I walked out and I did not look back. Behind me I heard my mother's voice climb to a shriek, Dale, how could you let her? And I heard my father answer, steady and clear for the first time in 31 years, because I'm finally letting her fix what I broke. If you have ever watched the truth walk into a room where the lights had been off for years, if you believe the littlest, quietest one in the family has a voice worth hearing, type sing anyway in the comments. Because that was the day mine came back, and I have not stopped since. The weeks after were a storm, and I won't pretend otherwise. My mother moved out of the family home and went to stay with my sister. She hired a lawyer to challenge the share transfer, and her own lawyer called her within days to tell her the documents were airtight and she'd be throwing good money after bad. She phoned the insurance company to update her address and learned, from a stranger on a customer service line, that she was no longer the beneficiary of a policy she'd counted on for 18 years. I'm told she screamed at my father over the phone. I'm told he stayed calm and said only, "It's done, Gail. Della's the donor. Della gets the policy." My brother-in-law, Tyler, found out from a coworker that I was the one who'd given the kidney, not from his own wife, who had let him stand up and applaud her at that dinner. He came home and asked her why he'd had to hear it from a stranger, why she'd let him look like a fool. That was the first crack in a marriage that is, to this day, in counseling and may not survive it. He said one thing to her that made its way back to me, and I've never forgotten it. Your dad didn't choose the daughter who threw a party. He chose the one who gave him a kidney. There's a difference. My mother called me one time, her voice pure ice, and accused me of manipulating a sick, medicated man into signing over his life while he was too weak to know better. I told her I hadn't known one single thing about any of it until after the dinner she'd staged, and I hung up while she was still going on about how I'd run the company into the dirt inside 6 months. My sister took the demotion. Her pride wouldn't let her walk, so she stayed on as a senior manager at $92,000 a year, in a building she used to run. And on a cold night just before Christmas, there was a knock at my door at 11 o'clock, and I opened it to find Whitney standing there, a coat thrown over her pajamas, mascara down her cheeks, half a bottle of wine into the worst night of her life. She sank onto my couch and she told me the truth. or as much of it as she could carry at once. That our mother had told her since she was 6 that she was the special one, the perfect one, that I was Dad's mistake. That being the golden child was its own kind of cage, every A, every promotion, never once enough, always one more thing left to earn. That she hadn't known our mother tried to stop the donation until she read it in the board documents, and that when she read it, she got physically sick. The fundraiser, she said, barely above a whisper. Mom told me to do it. 2 days after your surgery. She said if you got the credit for this, you'd hold it over us forever, that we needed our own story to tell. So I threw a party, and I took the credit, and I let you vanish. I didn't sit next to her. I sat across from her. And I looked at my sister, truly looked at her, for the first time in years, and I saw that she was broken too, just in a different shape than me. You're still demoted, I said. And I can't be your sister right now. Maybe not for a long while. But I hear you. And I believe you're sorry. That's going to have to be enough for now. She nodded. At the door she turned and asked me why I did it, why I gave him a kidney after everything they'd done to me. Because he's my father, and I love him, I said. Even when he didn't protect me. That doesn't just switch off because people hurt you. I used to wish it would. It doesn't. You're better than me, she said. No, I told her. I just made different choices. She left. I leaned my back against the closed door, and my cat, Olive, wound around my ankles, and I slid down and sat right there on the floor and cried, not from pain this time. From relief. From grief. From being, at long last, set down. Here's where things stand now, a few months on. I brought in an outside CEO to run Marsh Commercial, a sharp, decent woman named Sandra Beck with 25 years in the business and not one drop of Marsh blood, which was the whole point. The board approved her without a single no. I moved into the board chair's seat, kept my 51%, and drew a modest salary. And I kept my job at Golden Table, part-time, because I love those routes and the people at the end of them, and I was not about to let anyone, not even my own good fortune, take that from me. I paid off every last dollar of that $11,000 in medical debt. And then I did the thing I'm proudest of in all of this. I started the Nadine Fund, named for the aunt I never got to meet, the one I favor, the one this whole story turns on, and Marsh Commercial puts $50,000 a year into it to help living organ donors cover the costs nobody ever warns them about. The first check went to a young woman named Dawn, who gave a kidney to her sister and lost her job during recovery, the same way I nearly did. When I handed it to her she said, "You did this?" And I said, "Somebody should have done it for me." So now we do it for each other. The little logo on the Nadine Fund, if you ever see it, is a wren. My father lives alone now in a small place across the river. He sold the family home and split it with my mother in the separation. His kidney function is holding steady at 92%. We have coffee every Sunday. I told him, over eggs at a diner one morning, that I don't forgive him yet for the 31 years, but that I'm trying to understand them. And he said, "I don't deserve forgiveness. I just need to know you're going to be all right." I told him I was building something new, and that I wasn't invisible anymore. And he put his hand over mine and said, "You were never once invisible to me. I just couldn't figure out how to make you visible to them without losing everything. I chose wrong for a long time. But I believe I chose right there at the end." A few days ago a young woman came into the Golden Table office, 24, terrified, asking how to go about donating a kidney to her father. Her family, she said, wanted her older, more responsible sister to be the one, even though she was the better match. "What if I do this," she asked me, "and they still choose her? What if they still don't see me?" I rolled up my sleeve and showed her the scar, 6 inches now, faded to a soft pink, aching a little the way it does when the weather turns. "The surgery is the easy part," I told her. "Making sure people see what you gave, that's the hard part. But listen to me. If you do this and they still turn away, then you'll know exactly who they are. And you'll have the power to choose yourself. That's what this scar taught me. You lived through it. You can live through anything. She cried. She thanked me. She left. And I sat there a long moment and felt something settle in my chest that wasn't revenge and wasn't bitterness. It was purpose. I was taking the worst thing that ever happened to me and turning it into shelter for the next person out in the cold. So let me leave you with the one true thing I learned from all of it. The people who really love you don't always say it out loud in a crowded room. Sometimes they say it in a signature on a document. Sometimes they say it in 7 shaking lines on a napkin slid across a dinner table. And sometimes, if you're lucky, and I turned out to be, they spend years too afraid to speak, and then one night in a hospital bed they finally find the courage, and they hand you the voice you should have had all along. I keep that little carved wren on the windowsill in my new place now, right where I can see it from the bed. The littlest bird in the yard. Nobody ever looks at her. And she sings anyway. I'm Della Marsh. I'm 31 years old. I have 1 kidney, 1 scar, 1 company, and 1 true thing to my name. And I am not invisible anymore. If this story found you tonight, do me one last kindness. Share it, because somebody out there is sitting at a table right this minute, being erased in real time, and they need to know their voice was theirs the whole while. Subscribe if you want more stories like this one, real people, real reckonings, real justice. And tell me down in the comments, who was the one person in your life who finally saw you when nobody else would? I'll be reading every single word. Take care of yourselves. And remember, nobody gets to hand your sacrifice to somebody else and call it theirs. Not while you're still sitting right there. Not ever.